Would you ever hire family or friends to work in your business? Whether the answer is yes or no, this interview that I have lined up for you today is really going to answer some questions for you. Today, we're talking to Luis and Fonzie Camejo, two Venezuelan brothers, hosts of the top 0.5% global podcast, Content is Profit, part of the HubSpot network. And they are, you guessed it, brothers. How do they make this even work? Is this something you're even interested in doing? Before we start, I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Hiring family and friends. Is it a yes or a no? And then we'll dive into the interview. Hi, my name is Ina Coveney. I am a marketing strategist and business coach and podcaster. And this is a Superhumans podcast where we interview the top success stories that we see out there so that you can get all of the ideas, the lessons, the failures that all of these superhuman successful people have done so that you are convinced that you can do this too. If they can do it, so can you. That's our entire goal in these interviews, is to give you everything you need to become a superhuman yourself. Today, I want to chat with you a little bit before we get to the interview about this whole hiring family and friends thing, because I feel like everybody has got it completely backwards, and I want to come in and put in my 2 cents in this conversation. So I used to be like everybody else, never hire family and friends. The relationship is going to go awry. It doesn't work, etc., etc. Then I had my first taste at hiring a family member, and it went well. Turns out that if you treat your family member with respect, if you set the expectations for what the job is and you pay them an amount that they feel is worth it, they actually do the job and they do it well. Now, of course, it depends on the person. I would probably not hire somebody that I knew was not going to enjoy the job, not going to do the job well, right? Obviously, you do your due diligence. It's not a thing where you can just hire any family member and it works. It has to be the right person. And if it is the right person, as long as you have certain safeguards in place, it actually ends up really working out very nicely. I once was coaching someone who got photos for his photo shoot, got photos taken by a friend of his. And I didn't know this. I got his photos and I got his videos for all the social media stuff that we were going to do. And I told him, hey, can you please go back to your photographer and tell them to give us the files in the actual like MP4 format? Can you tell them to give us the files in the PNG format? Because they gave them to us in the raw format. And I don't have the tools to open those files. I need it in a different format. Can you please go back to your photographer and ask that? And he told me, well, actually, the photographer was a friend of mine. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Go back and ask him. He's like, yeah, but he doesn't really do this for a living. I'm like, okay, can you go back and ask? Yeah, but he, like I hired him for this, and I just don't think that it was his. I'm like, I'm sensing a lot of hesitation. Why can't we go back and ask him for the files? And he's like, well, I didn't really pay him. And I'm like, what? What did you just say? That he didn't pay him. And I'm like, okay. He's like, oh, I should have known better. I should have never hired a friend. I'm like, ba. You never hired your friend. You didn't pay your friend. You didn't make this worth your friend's time. And now we need something and you don't want to go back and ask for it. That doesn't sound like your friend did anything wrong here. And it just kind of like dawned on me that when we think hiring family and friends, we think we're going to get a cheap deal because they're family and friends. We think we have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more informality because they're family and friends, right? So we end up not really setting guidelines for the job. We end up setting a really low pay for the job. We end up feeling squeamish about going back and asking for more or going back and checking the quality of the work, right? We get all weirded out. And all of that weirdness can actually be avoided by simply treating our family and friends whom we hire as strangers whom we would hire. right? If this had been a real photographer with a real business, we would have paid them and we would have had certain expectations of quality. So when we think hiring family and friends, we have to stop thinking cheap and informal and loosey goosey. The only way engagements with family members work is if these are formal engagements. Yes, formal engagements with expectations set up front, with a 30-day period of review to make sure this is continuing to work for you and for them, with proper market-based pay, paying them on time. That's a big one. I don't know why people don't want to pay everybody. Pay your people on time. Pay when you say you're going to pay. Why are vendors out there chasing after you for money? That should never be the case. So when I hear these horror stories of I hired my family and friends and they never, were their expectations set? Were they getting paid fair market rate? Did you have a 30-day review period? Did you have a quality review? These are things that need to be said up front. And if your family member is not willing to comply with those rules, then you don't hire them. The end. But we have so much baggage in asking our family and friends for these things. If this is your business and you're considering hiring a family or friend, you got to put these guidelines in place. I have hired family members, and in fact, I prefer to hire family members because that means that the money stays in the family. It means that I'm helping my people out. And it helps us get to know each other better. It helps us relate better. I have hired my sister to do work for me, and I know that she's an excellent worker. So I pay her a fair market rate. I give her very explicit guidelines on what I expect for quality, and she does it in the timeline that I share with her, and I pay her. And she's happy, and I am happy. I have a VA who is actually my godson. And I know that by paying him, I'm helping him out, but this is not charity. He knows that there are certain guidelines that he must meet in order for him to keep this job. He knows that because I say that out loud and expressly say that to him so that there is never any doubt that this is not a handout. This is work for hire and he must meet these standards. And guess what? He does. I am about to hire someone else in my family, and we're going to have a 30-day review. And we're going to say in 30 days, we are going to assess whether this is working for you and for me. I am paying them fair market rate. We're having an initial meeting to go over all expectations, make sure that we both know what we're getting ourselves into, and they're going to get paid on time. And 30 days later, we're going to both review, is this still working for us? Yes or no? Or is Ina too much of a diva and you can't handle it? And that is okay. We just break it up right there and we continue to be friendly family members. But those expectations, that pay expectation, that formality needs to happen. And it doesn't have to be like a bad thing. It can be a fun thing. It can be like, hey, let's have a meeting. I'm going to review everything that I need, and you are going to tell me whether that's something that you can and are willing to do. That's it. And you can have so much fun working together. So as you listen to this episode, I just want you to remember that. Rather than going through the entire episode thinking, wow, I would never be able to work with my sister. By the way, that is probably correct. If you feel like you could never work with your sister, with your brother, with that one cousin who gives you grief, don't hire them. But if there are family members whom you have seen excel, people that you can give them small jobs and you know they do them and they do them right, then you can feel free to give those people a chance. This is not charity. This is a business. And if you can keep it in the family, all the better. But this has to be two consenting parties who understand the full expectations and understand the expectations for pay and for timeliness of pay. So without further ado, now that you know how to look at this, how to assess whether you should be working with family members or not, I want you to always remember that you are the boss and you need to be a leader, even if it's your family working for you. Be respectful of their time. Be respectful by explaining the full scope of the work. Be respectful by giving them a 30-day review quality period that you both understand that it's possible that at those 30 days, either of you can say, I don't think this is for me. Let's just cut it right here. Here's your pay and thank you very much. And pay them fair market rate. Never accept a friend or family member telling you, oh, you don't have to pay me. I'll do this as a friend. Never, never accept that. This is a business. They are a vendor and you need to be paying them for this. If they don't want to accept the money, then they are not going to be held accountable for the quality of their work, for the timeliness of the delivery. And there's really nothing in it for them, which is disrespectful to anybody's time to do that. So having said that, I'm getting off my soapbox now. Now we know how to treat family members who work for us. Amazing. I want to tell you about these two brothers who made it work and create an incredibly successful business doing it. Luis and Fonzie Camejo are the brothers behind the Studio Podcast Suites in Jacksonville, Florida, and Biz Bros. Through their agency and now state-of-the-art podcast studio, they have spent over 7 years mastering the art of content creation with the sole objective of driving opportunities and profits for businesses. As proud owners of Studio Podcast Suites and hosts of the top 0.5 global podcast, Content is Profit, they've helped hundreds with their content ecosystems and podcast production. The two Venezuelan brothers, once on a path to professional soccer, pivoted to entrepreneurship, driven by a passion to support their family back home and make a global impact. But most of all, they cherish the invaluable relationships they formed on their podcasting journey. Now, as online personalities, owners of Studio Podcast Suites, and part of the HubSpot Podcast Network, they're on a mission to help companies, business owners, and content creators transform their content into value-packed assets that amplify their message, build trust, and create consistent opportunities. It's time. Let's listen now from my friends, the Biz Bros. If you are watching on YouTube, all you have to do is click here to go to the full interview. And if you're listening on the podcast, this episode begins now.